Let me start with a hard truth. Comparison is not a harmless habit. It is a quiet addiction. It feels innocent, even motivating at first, but over time it corrodes your confidence, distorts your self-image, and disconnects you from your purpose. When you compare your life to someone else's highlight reel, you're not being ambitious, you're being distracted. First, understand this. You are not designed to be a copy. The moment you compare yourself to another person, you subconsciously accept the false belief that there is only one definition of success. But life doesn't work like that. Nature itself rejects uniformity. No two fingerprints, no two voices, no two journeys. So why would fulfillment come from imitation? Psychologically, comparison shifts your focus outward, away from growth and toward judgment. And growth cannot occur where judgment dominates. Second, stop measuring your progress with someone else's ruler. Time is relative. Some people bloom early, others mature slowly but deeply. Society praises speed, but wisdom values direction. When you rush because someone else is ahead, you don't accelerate, you fracture. Philosophy teaches us that meaning is not found in arrival, but in alignment. Ask yourself not how far am I compared to them, but am I closer to who I'm supposed to become? Third, anchor your identity in values, not validation. If your self-worth rises and falls based on external comparison, then your confidence is rented, not owned. Psychology is clear on this. External validation creates dependency, while internal standards create resilience. When you define success by integrity, effort, and growth, comparison loses its power because it no longer speaks your language. Fourth, compete only with your former self. The most intelligent form of ambition is self-referenced improvement. Yesterday is the only opponent worthy of your energy. This creates a feedback loop of discipline instead of despair. When progress is measured inwardly, motivation becomes sustainable and self-respect grows naturally. Finally, practice deliberate gratitude, not as positivity theater, but as mental training. Gratitude recalibrates perception. It reminds the mind that lack is not the same as failure. When you appreciate your current position, you regain psychological control, and control is freedom. Remember this, comparison asks, why not me? Purpose asks, who must I become? Choose the better question. Because the world doesn't need you to be better than someone else. It needs you to be fully, intentionally, unapologetically yourself. Comparison is a subtle but profound theft of presence. It doesn't arrive loudly, it slips in quietly, borrowing your attention one thought at a time until your mind is no longer where your feet are. The moment you compare yourself to someone else, you abandon the only moment where power exists, the present. Psychologically, this is dangerous because growth requires awareness, and awareness cannot survive when your attention is scattered across other people's lives. When you compare, you are no longer living your story, you are auditing someone else's. Think about it deeply. Comparison shifts your consciousness from being to judging. Instead of asking, what am I learning? Or how can I improve? The mind asks, am I ahead or behind? That question is toxic, because it assumes life is a race with a single finish line. Philosophically, that idea collapses under scrutiny. If fulfillment were linear and universal, wisdom, peace, and meaning would all peak at the same age, the same income, the same status. But reality disproves this every day. Some people reach success and feel empty. Others struggle materially, yet live with profound clarity and purpose. When you compare yourself, you don't just steal joy, you distort truth. You see outcomes without context, results without sacrifice, success without struggle. The mind fills in the gaps with self-blame. This creates a false narrative. They are winning, I am failing. But that narrative is built on incomplete data. You don't see their doubts, their discipline, their private losses. And more importantly, you ignore your own progress because it doesn't look like theirs. Presence is power because it is where intention becomes action. When your attention is rooted in your own path, you make better decisions, develop deeper skills, and cultivate authentic confidence. Comparison fractures that focus. It turns your mind into a courtroom where you are both the defendant and the harshest judge. To stop comparing, you must reclaim presence deliberately. Each time your mind drifts towards someone else's timeline, bring it back to your own effort, your own values, your own next step. Mastery does not come from watching others move forward. It comes from fully inhabiting your own movement. When you stop comparing, you don't fall behind, you finally arrive. Every human life unfolds according to a different clock, yet we exhaust ourselves trying to synchronize with timelines that were never designed for us. The moment you measure your progress against someone else's pace, you assume that speed equals worth. Psychologically, this belief creates anxiety. Philosophically, it misunderstands the nature of growth. Time is not a moral judge. It does not reward the fast and punish the slow. It simply reveals readiness. Look closely at life, and you'll see that early arrival often comes with shallow roots. Some people achieve success quickly, but spend decades learning how to sustain it. Others move slowly, building depth, resilience, and wisdom before their moment arrives. When you compare timelines, you ignore this essential truth. What matures slowly often lasts longer. A mind that rushes because of comparison does not become efficient. It becomes fragile. There is also a hidden arrogance in comparison that few people recognize. It assumes you know when things should happen. But who decides that? Society? Social media? A highlight reel edited for applause? Philosophy reminds us that control is an illusion. You can govern effort, not outcomes. You can choose discipline, not destiny. When you judge yourself for not being there yet, you are punishing yourself for not knowing the future. Psychologically, comparison to another timeline triggers chronic dissatisfaction. You may reach milestones and still feel behind because someone else reached them sooner. This is how people become successful yet restless, accomplished yet unfulfilled. The mind is always chasing a moving target, but fulfillment does not live in acceleration, it lives in alignment. Progress that honors your values, capacity, and circumstances is not delay, it is precision. Consider this. If you arrived at everything instantly, who would you become? Struggle educates. Waiting refines. Delays often prepare the character required to handle what you are asking for. When you rush your timeline, you may get the reward without the readiness. And that is not a blessing. It is a burden. Stop asking, why am I not there yet? And start asking, what is this season teach? Hing me? When you respect your own timing, patience replaces pressure, clarity replaces comparison, and confidence grows quietly. Life is not late. You are not behind. You are exactly where your development demands you to be. When your sense of self is built on comparison, your identity becomes unstable because it depends on forces you do not control. The opinions, achievements, and recognition of others become silent judges of your worth. Psychologically, this creates a fragile self-concept, one that rises with praise and collapses with perceived failure. A mind that depends on external validation is always anxious because it is never truly at home within itself. Identity grounded in values, however, is fundamentally different. Values do not fluctuate with trends, applause, or competition. They are internal standards, principles you choose to live by regardless of outcome. When you define yourself by honesty, discipline, courage, learning, or service, comparison loses its authority. Another person's success no longer diminishes you because it does not violate your values. Your identity is no longer up for negotiation. Philosophically, this is the difference between having and being. External validation is something you have. It can be given and taken away. Values are something you are. When you confuse the two, you spend your life trying to acquire worth instead of expressing it. That confusion leads people to chase titles, attention, and approval, believing these things will finally make them feel whole. But wholeness cannot be outsourced. Psychology shows us that people with strong internal standards are more resilient under pressure. They recover faster from setbacks because failure does not attack their identity. It only informs their strategy. A person who fails at a task may feel disappointed, but a person who fails at being better than others feels diminy. Shed. One learns, the other suffers. When comparison dominates, you start performing instead of living. You make choices based on how they look rather than who they shape you into. Over time, this creates inner conflict, the quiet exhaustion of pretending. But when values lead, your decisions become cleaner, simpler, and more courageous. You may still feel fear, but it no longer controls you. To stop comparing, you must ask a deeper question than how do I rank? Ask, am I acting in alignment with what I believe matters? That question recenters the mind. It shifts your focus from competition to character, and character, unlike comparison, compounds. When you live by values, self-respect grows steadily, confidence becomes quiet but firm, and your identity stands unshaken, regardless of where others stand. The most intelligent form of ambition is not aimed outward, but inward. When you measure your life against others, you surrender control of motivation to circumstances you cannot influence. There will always be someone richer, faster, more praised, or seemingly more advanced. That comparison creates a race with no finish line. But when you choose to compete only with your former self, ambition becomes focused, disciplined, and sustainable. Self-measurement is psychologically powerful because it creates clarity. Yesterday becomes a concrete reference point, not an abstract fantasy. You know exactly what you improved, what you neglected, and what must be refined. This transforms motivation from emotional impulse into deliberate practice. You are no longer driven by envy or insecurity, but by evidence. Evidence builds confidence far more reliably than comparison ever could. Philosophically, this approach respects the reality of human limitation. You cannot embody every talent, seize every opportunity, or win every arena, but you can become more honest than you were yesterday, more skilled than you were last month, more disciplined than you were last year. This is not small thinking, it is precise thinking. Greatness is not the absence of limits, it is the mastery of what lies within them. When people compare themselves to others, they often swing between arrogance and despair. If they feel ahead, they grow complacent. If they feel behind, they lose hope. Self-reference growth stabilizes the mind. Progress becomes measurable, and setbacks become instructive rather than humiliating. Failure stops being a verdict on your worth and starts becoming feedback on your method. There is also a moral clarity in self-competition. You are not wishing for someone else to fail so you can feel superior. You are not quietly resentful of another person's success. Your energy is clean. It is invested in effort, not ego. This kind of ambition builds character alongside competence. Ask yourself daily, did I show up with more intention than yesterday? Did I act with greater integrity? Did I learn something I didn't know before? If the answer is yes, you are winning regardless of who is applauded today. Over time, small internal victories accumulate into visible excellence. When mastery becomes your focus, comparison becomes irrelevant. You are too busy becoming better to worry about being better than someone else. Gratitude is not a decorative emotion reserved for moments of comfort. It is a discipline of perception. When practiced deliberately, it restructures the way the mind interprets reality. Comparison thrives on perceived lack, what you do not have, what you have not achieved, who you have not become yet. Gratitude interrupts that pattern by forcing the mind to acknowledge what already exists. Psychologically, this shift is profound because the brain cannot simultaneously focus on appreciation and envy with the same intensity. Many people misunderstand gratitude as passive acceptance, as if being thankful means lowering ambition. In truth, gratitude and purpose sharpen ambition. Gratitude grounds you in reality. Purpose pulls you forward with intention. Without gratitude, ambition becomes restless and resentful. Without purpose, gratitude becomes complacent. Together, they form a balanced psychological state, content but not complacent, driven but not desperate. Philosophically, gratitude redefines wealth. Wealth is not the absence of desire, it is the presence of sufficiency. When you feel sufficient, you stop chasing validation and start pursuing meaning. This is why people who constantly compare often feel poor regardless of their achievements. Their attention is fixed on what others possess, so their own gains feel invisible. Gratitude reclaims attention and returns it to your own life. Purpose deepens this effect. When you know why you are doing what you are doing, comparison loses relevance. Other people's paths no longer threaten you because they are not competing for the same meaning. Purpose is personal. It cannot be stolen, replicated, or outpaced. A person without purpose looks sideways. A person with purpose looks forward. From a psychological standpoint, gratitude lowers anxiety and increases resilience because it reminds you of your capacity to endure, adapt, and grow. It reframes struggle not as evidence of inadequacy, but as proof of engagement with life. When you recognize what you have already survived and learned, the urge to compare diminishes naturally. Make gratitude intentional, not vague appreciation, but specific acknowledgement, your skills, your lessons, your progress, your opportunities. Pair it with purpose by asking, how can I use what I have to move closer to what matters? That question transforms comparison into contribution. When gratitude becomes a habit and purpose becomes a compass, the mind no longer seeks superiority, it seeks alignment. And in alignment, peace replaces envy, focus replaces distraction, and confidence grows quietly from within.